Oh, howdy all, grab yourself a drink. It is time for some PathOfExile discussion. Welcome to day 9 of teaser season for patch 3.25 and the upcoming Settlers of Kalguur expansion. Today, we've got one piece of news, but it's a fairly significant one. This is going to affect every character that's made in the past of the game and also in the future, and it's going to be something you'll encounter pretty early in progression. That is, changes to the Bandit quest rewards in Act 2. Currently, the Bandit quest rewards are one of the most lucrative quests in the game. You get either 2 passive points, or the option to cash in those 2 passive points for a different reward instead. What's happening here is that the Bandit quest reward is being halved. It's going to be 1 passive point or a weaker effect, and then that power is being transferred to another quest. So there's going to be a flat out buff to one of the other quests in Act 2 that currently just gives respec points. It's now going to give a passive skill as well as respec points. That's going to be the infamous Golden Hand quest, which is reasonably close to one of the Labyrinth trials you'd be going to anyway. So, with the Bandits, the new rewards are going to be pretty simple. If you help Oak, you're going to get 40 maximum life. This is flat life, so it's going to multiply by percentage increases to life you've got on your character's passive tree, or much more rarely on gear. Alira is going to be 15% to each elemental resistance. Note that this is just elemental resistances, the same as Alira is now. She doesn't want to protect you from chaos. And then Creighton is going to provide 8% increased movement speed. Essentially though, the opportunity cost for taking these is only 1 passive point now, and that's a lot less than 2. I think that for new players, the best choice is probably going to be to help Oak or Alira for the powerful defensive bonus early on, and which one is going to depend upon their experience with gearing in the game. For veteran players, ultimately at endgame you're going to want Creighton. Now you may not decide to start with Creighton, you may decide to start with one of the things that provides you with a big boost early in power, and then respec over to Creighton later. But 8% movement speed is simultaneously a loot acquisition multiplier and also a defensive stat. People don't talk about move speed as a defensive stat very much, but it is because it helps you not be where the enemy is hitting, and that's one of the most powerful defensive layers in the game. So even if you're playing a dedicated boss killer, you'll probably find that this is the best of these options defensively. Additionally, it's also an offensive stat because if you've got to get out of the way of a boss big slam attack, and getting out of the way takes you 1.17 seconds, then that allows you to get back into DPSing quicker than if getting out of the way of that attack takes you, say, 1.23 seconds. It's not the most efficient damage stat in the game, but it certainly does help there as well. Now, there are certainly builds that don't care about movement speed. They use a move skill to traverse most ground, and as a result, don't really get any benefit out of Creighton. If you're in that situation, you're definitely not helping Creighton. In that case, you're probably going to want to help Alira if you've got a lot of unique items on your build that end up making it really difficult to cap resistances. But otherwise, both other options are pretty reasonable. Either help Oak for a second copy of the Life Mastery that's slightly less effective, or alternately, you can kill all of the bandits and get 1 point closer to the next notable on your passive tree or the next dual socket, which of course can be really strong. Now, the most important thing that I think a lot of people are not thinking of here is the impact this is going to have on early game mana sustain. I've pretty much always advocated that newer players in particular take Alira early on. Not because Alira is the best at endgame, but because the 5 flat mana regen per second that she provided is something that solves a lot of early game progression problems. That's going away, and it's going to be interesting to see how things shake out as a result. I know there are certainly a few builds, not many, but a few like Absolution, that drink so much mana that even using a duration-based mana flask that is not enduring, and also using Clarity at max level, and also using Alira, was not quite enough to sustain spamming the spell during the axe. At endgame, there are a number of solutions that you can find that address this problem completely, but early on, mana could be quite difficult on some builds, and this will definitely have an impact on certain builds and how they feel during the campaign. In 3.24 and earlier, there were a few ways that you could deal with mana cost during the campaign. One of them was speccing Eldritch Battery, which makes your energy shield function like additional mana. The second one was using life tap support, which allows a particular skill to be cast with life instead of mana. The third way was focusing on mana regeneration through the use of Clarity Aura, helping Alira, and also a little bit of support from the passive tree, or a little bit of support from pretty much anything else, and a lot of support from a mana flask. This third option, I think, is in a much worse state as a result of the changes to Alira, because often Clarity just doesn't provide enough mana regen per second, and the flat regen that you were getting from helping Alira was a big piece of the puzzle keeping everything together. As a result, I think that the main impact of this change early in progression is going to be getting more people to rush Eldritch Battery. Eldritch Battery was already really good, and it's already something a lot of people were rushing on spellcasters, but for people that were holding out and helping Alira instead and focusing on that mana recovery, I think now time to join Club Eldritch Battery or Club Life Tap, whichever of them you prefer. There's also two other unique items that are going to be considerably worse as a result of this change. They're not getting directly nerfed, at least nothing's been announced as yet, but they're going to be quite a bit weaker because of these changes to mana. Tabula Rasa is one of them. Now you can definitely use Tabula still in conjunction with either Life Tap or Eldritch Battery, but Tabula puts a lot of pressure on your mana anyway, and that pressure is only going to be worse with Allura not being an option. Secondly, Bitter Dream is going to be the other one, and Bitter Dream actually has even more mana issues than Tabula Rasa does. Again, Bitter Dream is something that you can address by using Life Tap, but if you're not using Life Tap, Bitter Dream is going to become very, very difficult to use while you're leveling. Anyway, those are the changes that are coming. I think that this is a net buff, but not for every single build, because most people were taking the 2 passive points anyway. Now you get one of those passive points, and then you get to choose between a passive point or 3 things that are at least reasonable options to take instead. And I think for most people, you're going to take 8% movement speed and 1 passive point, which is probably better than what you were getting for 2 passive points in the past. But there will certainly be people who fall behind as a result of this change. I'll leave it there. May your Varlorbs have interesting results.